Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Thursday live stream. I think I'm all right. I think everything is working. Looks very suspiciously to me like I'm live. So if you're watching, please say hi, firstly, and let me know you're there. And also, please let me know if you can see me and if you can hear me okay. As far as I can see, it looks like everything is working. Casey, hello, nice to see you. Hi, Kathy, nice to see you. Alison's here too, brilliant. Looks like we're up and running. So today is another one of the Thursday streams that I do where I demonstrate something that someone has asked me to do. And I've had a few requests for painting glass. And as you'll know, if you've got the email that I sent out earlier on, if you're on my subscriber list, it's spring, it's daffodil season, so how can I resist painting some daffodils? So I've got a couple over here. This is actually the one, this daffodil is the one that we did last week in values only, and this is the one that I've taken a photo of to work from today, both from the garden. So a couple of things that are going to be really interesting about the stream today, what I'm going to be doing, and this particular subject. Firstly, from a point of view of glass, the one thing that I find that people do when they paint glass is if it's a vase or a glass or something like that, they paint the entire outline of the thing. They paint the glass as if it's a thing. And I think the way to make glass more convincing is to paint what you can see through the glass, rather than paint the glass itself, and lose as many of the edges as you can. So the best way to approach it, I think, is to squint right down. When I'm painting, I'm usually like this. When I'm looking at the subject, I've got one eye closed and I've squinted the other one right down. To squint right down, to simplify it as much as possible, and then anything that isn't an obvious edge to you when you're squinted down, just leave it out. Okay. So you'll see me doing that in a short while. And daffodils are very high chroma yellow, which brings up some interesting stuff about the colour, especially the colour of the shadows, because I know a lot of people struggle with this. So if you've seen the materials list, for this one I actually put out a materials list and some reference photos. So Olaf's here, hello Olaf, and Jeannie, and Marianne, nice to see you. And Morris and Sasha is here, brilliant. And Susan, fantastic. And Zumi, good to see you. Thanks for the email, Zumi, that was really nice. It's just nice to know that people are watching, you know. So yeah, I know that yellow is a colour that a lot of people struggle with, especially very high chroma yellow. So I'm going to be talking quite a bit about that. Enough chit chat, let's get over to the easel. I'll knock this big light off so we're not too overexposed. Wait for the camera to adjust. Okay, so you can see pretty much straight away when you look at the palette here and you look at the photo of the subject. I have two yellows here. One of them is fairly close in hue to the daffodil, and another one is not very close. This one is not that close. This one here is not that close. This one here is much closer. Now this yellow here is cadmium yellow. Okay. Cadmium yellow. This is Michael Harding. These are both Michael Harding. This is Michael Harding Bright Yellow Lake, which is an arrowlide yellow, and this one is PY3. It's a very green yellow. Very green indeed. So let me show you something interesting. This is to do with like the Munsell chips here. So here is the actual daffodil, right? So you can see hopefully there that the photograph of it is fairly well color corrected. This is the actual daffodil that's up there in the photo, okay? So what you can do, you know, if you want to find out, if you want to mix a color and find out how close it is to an actual thing, you can stick it on your palette, no reason why not. Except of course that you just have moved it. But if you were painting like a few daffodils, then you could get, you know, a similar one and try it. and tried, you know, get a bit of paint on the palette knife and try it against the actual thing. And you can see that's too light and too green, but not so much for the outside. For these outside petals, what I call the radial petals here, they are more green, and this goes more towards orange, the trumpet. So it's a little bit too high chroma, right? Hopefully you can see that. Let me make this. I think what I'll do is I'll make the palette full screen so you can really see a bit better. This is the Arylide Yellow, PY3. It's too light in value. It's way too high in chroma, which is good news because we don't want to run out of chroma, do we? So the hue looks about right. So we'd have to drop the chroma and the value a little bit for it to match. So let's have a look at that yellow against the trumpet. Too light, it's a bit too green, and the chroma's about right though. But what about the cadmium yellow? You know, instinctively you would probably reach for cadmium yellow. Most of you probably don't even have an Arylide yellow. You might have a lemon yellow, right? Hello Leanne, that's brilliant. First time in one of the streams. Well, they go fairly slow, just warning you. Let's try cadmium yellow against this outside. Oh, it's completely wrong. Look how orange that looks against these radial petals. And in fact, even against the trumpet, it's closer with the trumpet, but it's still quite a bit too orange. Too orange and too dark. So that's an interesting thing about the yellows, okay? So for a starting point, we want, for me, if I'm going to paint something like this, the first thing I want to get right is what you call the local color, like the color that something is, independent of the light, okay? Let me take the photo off for a second. Hopefully I'll remember to bring it back. If I forget, shout me. Paul, bring the photo back. It has been known to happen. Okay, so if I wanted to mix, say, the color for the outside radial petals here, this was not too far off, was it? You know, but it was a bit too, the hue looked about right, but it was too high chroma. And it was too light. So I want to darken it with something. I've got a bunch of choices here. I could darken it with raw umber, which is a yellow orange. But that would lose loads of chroma really, really fast before it brought the value down much. I could use this, which is transparent red oxide, which would make it go very orange. This is green gold. That would keep the green and drop the value. This is yellow ochre. That would make it go very orange. Okay. Sheila, you're embarrassing me. Susan, hello. I'm glad Jelly Bean's come. Hopefully she's going to enjoy it. Hello, Catherine. And Penny's here too. Good to see you, Penny. And Janice, you're very welcome. And Miriam's here. Hello, Miriam. Okay, so I don't want to choose any of these these ones that are more towards orange. I'm going to choose the one that's more towards green, right? It's probably going to go a little bit too green. But this is Michael Harding Green Gold. You can get this from Williamsburg as well, and I believe it's quite a bit cheaper. So let's just bring that down a little bit in value, which will also drop the chroma a little bit, and see where we are then. Not bad actually, it's a lot closer, but the chroma is still a little bit high and it's gone a little bit too green. So what I'd be inclined to do with that is to swing it a little bit more towards orange. And bringing in yellow ochre would be a pretty good choice. A really small amount though, because that's going to swing it round towards orange a little bit, and it's going to drop the chroma a little bit too. And that's going to be pretty much perfect. That's going to be just about what we want. This is just the local colour, remember. So from this you're going to have lighter parts, you're going to have shadow areas as well. But it's a really good place to start by nailing a local colour. And this, by the way, practice of just mixing stuff, that's a lot closer now. just mixing stuff and trying to match colours of things in the real world is it's really good practice for your mixing skills. Chroma's a little bit high, but I'd rather overshoot slightly than not have enough. All right then, radial petals, local yellow, we'll call that. So what about the trumpet? Well, I reckon the trumpet is between these two yellows. This one was a bit too green. And this one was a bit too orange. So if I mix them together, I should get something that's in between the two. The chroma might be a little bit high still because I'm at like maximum chroma in yellow here. And actually daffodils, they are high chroma, but they're not usually, at least the ones that grow in my garden that I paint, aren't the highest chroma that you can get with paint. Well, that's looking a bit better. I would say it's a little bit light still, possibly. What do you think? Wants to go a little bit more orange, I would say. The chroma's about right. Actually, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good match, but it wants to go a little bit more orange. Come down in value a little bit. So I'm going to put in a little bit of yellow ochre because that's going to make it more, slightly more towards orange, and it's going to drop the value a little bit as well. I'll lose a tiny bit of chroma, but I think I was overshooting the chroma anyway. So this is, I think when you're painting stuff, this is a really good place to start, just to make sure that you nail the local colours of what you're painting. Yeah, I mean that's pretty good, I would say. Local colour for the trumpet. Probably should have mixed more. So then you come to wondering like what they're going to be in shadow. And the thing about daffodils that I think you really need to nail is you need to make sure that you don't allow the shadows to go too low in value. So if you had a value scale like this, see this is like the Munsell value scale, and the light values that I've mixed there are up around here, around this value, near the top of the value scale. So I wouldn't want to be going lower than that for the shadow values, lower than halfway down the scale. Probably not much lower than that one, not even all the way down. Maybe the inside of the trumpet would be about there, and the radial petals would be about there, the shadows. And it's handy to know that. And you can also get these, by the way, value scales. If you've seen one of these streams before, you've probably seen one of these. This is from Paul Kentore. You can get it on eBay. If you search for Munsell value scale, Paul Kentore, make sure you put Munsell value scale. That will come up, and it's a really useful little kind of a tool. So how do I know that I want to keep the values quite high? It's because I do a lot of this. Now this isn't going to work quite as well, but look, if you're like me, which I know not many people have, but if you have the big Munsell book, like here's a page from the Munsell book, okay? So this is like all of the colors that I can mix. Obviously you can mix between them, but these are just like stopping places that I can mix in what's called here 5Y, which is middle yellow in Munsell terms, which is somewhere between these two, which is probably just about what I've got here, okay? So here's the next page along. Slightly more green yellow. You can see the difference between them. And this one is pretty close to the outside of the radial petals. Okay. Interesting thing about that though is, look, I've already picked out a couple of colours that I think are close to the local colour. And you can do it like this, look. You can get a chip out and you can actually hold it against the thing and get a really close match that way. And then mix the colour, you know, you can do it that way. It's like an intermediary, if you like. It can be pretty useful. But also you can, if you have something like this set up on your still life stand or wherever you set up your still lifes, you can get a bit of card with a hole in it like this, which allows you to isolate colours. And you could get, say I could choose one of the colours from this page, say say this one, that's the middle value 5. Is possibly the shadow color. Now it looks very green, but you can hold it like that. See if I can, this won't work so well because I've got 2 lights on at the moment, but try and hold that over a piece of shadow and check what the color is. And it's probably a little bit too green, but it's pretty close. I'm looking at like this bit of shadow here. Let's try and see if I can get that bit of shadow there. Slightly tricky to do whilst because I've got to look at the screen, not what I'm doing. Come on, line up. Yeah. Hopefully you can get an idea of how you can go about doing that. But this obviously would be standing up in a vase, and the light would be from one direction, which is a different lighting situation because here I've got light coming from 2 sides. Both sides, in order to light the palette properly and light the panel properly as well. 5Y, yes, Casey, there you go, daffodil color. And just go a little bit more, to green yellow if you have the arrowline yellow, or a lemon yellow would get you close. It just doesn't have the chroma really. For the radial petals, they're slightly different, and now I really like to get that slight difference. So let's say I wanted, I'm going to get a bit more yellow out actually. A shadow color for those radial petals. I'm just starting with this because I think it's really interesting, this stuff. A lot of people struggle with mixing yellows, I know, so. Casey says, would that method work plein air? It would, but it would only work if the sun was behind you, if the light source was behind you. Otherwise, and it wouldn't work with the sky, because the sky is effectively a light source, and if you held something up to the sky like that, it would be silhouetted. So, no, it wouldn't work quite the same way. I don't think. Oh, sorry about that. My camera control software just crashed. Hopefully it will come back. So Miriam says, am I correct in saying that the local color is in the area under the most direct light from your light source? Not really. That would be, not really. The local color is independent of light. So if I look at this daffodil, there's a bunch of different colors, light and shadow. So if I hold this chip to the same angle as the light, as a specific part of it, say the outer frills of the trumpet, and it matches, then that's the local color. But it will also match if I hold it on the inside, so it's in shadow. Do you see what I mean? Light, shadow. You can see the color of the chip changing. So it's the color that something is regardless of the light. So the easiest way, I think, to think about this is, see this cube? Each of these planes has a slightly different color in light and shadow, but the color I painted this, the color that I mixed to paint this, is the local color. So it's the color that something is independent of the light. Independent of light and shadow. So, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm going to mix a shadow color for the radial petals. And then I'm probably just going to start, So I know I want it to be greenish, so I'm going to bring in this green gold, and I'm going to bring the value down. I'm going to try and make sure I don't bring it down too far though. The only downside I find about this arrowline yellow is it's very, very transparent. I always think in terms of the hue first, I want to get the right color. But what tends to happen is, especially because the green gold is quite transparent as well, is that you end up with a very transparent paint, which can affect, how you use it. The cadmium, this color here that has a little bit of the cadmium is opaque, so that color there will be more opaque. This one will be more translucent. I don't find that it's a huge problem in practice, but it's just something good to be aware of. Okay, so I'm bringing this down quite a long way. So in terms of my value scale, I'm going to bring it down to about value 5, which is about there, right? So here's the high values, low values. It's really handy to have a value scale like this, just to kind of, I think anyway, just to orientate yourself in the color space, just from a value point of view. So I don't want to go all the way down yet, because that's going a bit too green. So in order to keep that from going too green and bring it back a little orange, I can put in a little bit of yellow ochre, which will swing it back a little bit more orange. And the problem with my yellow ochre is that the value is it's a little bit above value 5. So it's not going to bring the value down far enough. I think that's not bad though, that's looking pretty good to me. So that's going to be my shadow color. It looks really green, right? If you just mix the color, it looks really green. Shadow color for my radial petals. Juliana says, I have Old Holland golden green. Is it similar to green gold? I imagine it is. Have you got the tube handy, and does it say? I think Old Holland says on it what the pigment is. I can tell you what the pigment is on this one. I find though, the funny thing is, even you can get the same paint by a different manufacturer, they call it the same, even have the same pigment, and it's a slightly different color. I can't figure out why that is. But this is PY, which means yellow, 129. Ergazine yellow, ground in linseed oil. That's what Michael Harding green gold is. And I think the Williamsburg one is really similar too. So shadow color for the trumpet. I'm going to mix 2 colors to get this, okay? I'm going to start off with both of them with Owl-Eyed Yellow, but one of them I'm going to bring down just with green gold. I want it to be slightly lighter than this one though, because there's no shadow areas. If you look at the photo, there's no shadow areas on the trumpet that are quite as dark as the darkest shadow areas on the trumpet. On the radial leaves, radial petals, sorry. So that's a really green, right? That's too green, you know? But if I take this yellow again and I bring down the value with yellow ochre this time, it's going to go much more orange. The yellow ochre and the green gold especially, they keep the chroma fairly well as well. So these are about the same value, right? They should be about, say, 6. It's tough to judge when the chroma is high, but about that there. The greens might be a bit darker. No, it's all right, I think. So what I want is actually in terms of the hue, which means how green or orange it goes, is something in between the two, which is fairly easily done just by getting a bit of both and mixing between them. So this is going to be, because the trumpet is more orange than the radial petals, a little bit more towards orange. The shadow color will be too. That's the shadow color for my trumpet. Maybe it's a little bit too green still, but we'll see how it goes. Should be all right. So that's the local color for the trumpet, and the shadow for the trumpet, the local color for the radial petals, and the shadow for the radial petals. Now there will be some highlights on both of those where that specific area of the petal or the trumpet is pointing towards the light more, facing towards the light. And what will tend to happen there is the value will come up a little bit from the local, and the chroma will come up a little bit too. More light equals more chroma. People will tell you that the highest chroma is in the half tone. By all means believe them, but it's not true. The highest chroma is always, at least in higher chroma colors anyway, is what's facing the light. Enough mixing. Let's start messing about with the palette. With the painting, sorry. I'll bring the thing, I remember that, here's the photo, there we go. Bring the palette back up. Where have you gone, palette? There it is. So you can see now, hopefully, you know, a little bit more of what I was talking about, the difference in colour if you look between the palette and the photo. So here's the trumpet and here's the radial petals. You know, the radial petals are slightly more green and these are slightly more orange. Shadow colours, Rebecca says, 4 attempts at shadow colours, couldn't get them. I know that they're difficult to mix. And I think you'll probably struggle if you don't have colours that will let you get this kind of chroma in this area of the hue range. Like if you use just cad yellow, say, and you tried to bring down the value with something like raw umber, then you would find you'd lose too much chroma, you'd lose a lot of chroma. And also the hue would be too orange. The main thing to get is the value, but the hue and the chroma are important as well. Me personally, I think the chroma is the most important after the value, and then the hue. And Helen says, would cad yellow with a bit of burnt umber make an acceptable yellow ochre? Mine hasn't arrived yet. It's an interesting thought. Why don't we find out? Burnt umber. You're thinking along the right lines, it seems to me, because they're both slightly orange. Burnt umber is kind of a red orange. It's not going to be a million miles away, you know. So that is burnt umber and cad yellow. And there is yellow ochre next to it. Let's bring some more yellow in so I get the values the same. Gone too far. It's more green. It's perfectly acceptable, I would say, but it's a little bit more green, isn't it? Can you see that? So if you wanted to fix that, you could put a tiny little bit of transparent red oxide in it, which would send it a bit more orange. And then you would be really close. The chroma is higher. The chroma is slightly higher now. Pretty close though. It's not as opaque, seems to me. And the chroma is higher and it's still a little bit more green. So this is raw umber and white. I want to drop the chroma. Raw umber is good to drop the chroma with because it's very low chroma itself to start with, and it's in the orange area. Get the values about the same. Bring a little bit of that in. Actually, I probably should use burnt umber because this may send it a bit more green. Yeah, it's close. It did go too green. I should have used either burnt umber or transparent red oxide then. Let's bring transparent red oxide up. Little aside on mixing here, like this is interesting to find out these things though. Yeah, that would get you really close. I've probably dropped the chroma a little bit too much. Maybe raised the value too much, so I'll put a little bit of TRO in on its own. Basically, yeah, you can mix a yellow ochre. It's slightly fiddly, but you can get there. That's not perfect, but it's fairly close. Hello, Diane, that's all right, and no need to apologise for being a bit late. These are my more kind of relaxed streams, you know, no pressure. We're investigating and I'm just demonstrating stuff that people have asked me to do. We need to start doing some painting, don't we, really? So here is where I'm going to start. Linseed oil, cold pressed linseed oil. You're welcome, Helen, anytime. So yeah, I would say the burnt umber and the yellow and the cadmium yellow, at least in Michael Harding. I'm going to put in a bit of pure gum terps as well, just as any solvent will do. This is just to cut the oil so that it dries faster, really. So potentially I could be doing a second session on this painting tomorrow if I decide to. I want to cover the panel, so I use a brush I don't care about, an awful Rosemary's Hog flat, which I rarely use for anything except texture and covering panels. Just whack it on. I think my easel camera is overexposed. Let's have a look. You can just about see that going on, right? So I'm going to completely cover the panel with this. If you need to make sure that you don't miss any bits, you can look to the side and get some glare on it from a light, and that will show you if you've missed any bits. But don't leave it like that. That's way too much on there. And then wipe most of it off until you've got a thin layer. And this just really helps the brush flow. Now, what I would quite often do is tone that as well with a mixture of raw umber, ivory, black and white. But I'm not going to do it this time, because if I do, I'll have to wipe it right back when I come to paint the flower. You can see the reflection there in the oil of the palette knife. And I would lose chroma in my yellows if I painted them into even a slight neutral, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to get some, mix a near-ish but slightly warm neutral, raw umber, ivory, black, and some titanium white. I probably will use some of that for the background somewhere anyway, so I'll make a little bit of that up. And then this brush is the one that I'm going to use for drawing out. Now I've gridded it today, and I'm going to work from the grid because it's just way faster, especially for streaming live. So I'm going to judge this by eye. I like to do it this way because it's good practice. So I'm holding that really loose. Find what I think is about the middle. It doesn't matter if it's perfect, I just want it to be pretty good. And then with a fairly light pressure, but just enough to stop it wobbling about. Oops. It's a little bit to the right. Probably there's more middle. So divide it again. I'm not bothered about absolute perfection in this, but it's like a little kind of a game I like to play with grids, because it's practice for eyeballing, for judging distances. So what's halfway? I'm not going all the way down because I don't need to. That's probably about halfway vertically. I can do a horizontal. And also, when I'm doing these, that's really wonky. I try to stay aware of the whole panel, and it helps you get them more straight and in the right place. And it's also good. That's also good practice for some reason my horizontals want to go a little bit high today. They want to slant up to the right. Stop it. Stop doing that. That's a bit too high. Bring it down to there. It's all right. It's probably one of the worst grids I've ever done in my life, but it'll do. Why am I adding terps? Oh, this isn't canvas, this is an ampersand board. I add terps just because if I just put oil on there, it would take a long time to dry. And if I put terps on as well, a mixture of oil and terps, it dries more quickly. So that the first layer will be It'll be more likely to dry by tomorrow or the next day, and I can work over it again. It won't underbind the paint because remember, this layer is really, really thin. I wiped most of it off. Cold pressed linseed oil and terps. I used these two together. It's nicer if you just paint with the oil, but if you just do it with the oil, it just takes forever to dry, I find, and it's a bit of a pain. So I'm just going to whack this in fairly quickly because, you know, the point of the exercise today is not drawing out. It's painting glass and a daffodil. So I'm going highest point, lowest point, furthest left, furthest right. Handily, the edge of the little jar actually comes down pretty much on this grid line here. On the other side, it's just the other side of it. Just makes things so much quicker to rough out if you're after doing something reasonably quickly. And the top. So I like to, when I'm doing something geometric like this, a bowl or a vase or a glass or anything, I like to find that after I've found the two outsides, furthest left and furthest right, I like to find the middle point. Kind of really helps with getting the ellipse roughed out. I covered ellipses the other week. Now sometimes I do them really carefully and sometimes I just bang them in. Probably this one's going to be a nightmare and I'll just correct it as I go. So the water level is going to be out there probably. The top of the bottle is coming about there. I don't want to get too obsessed about painting this little jar because I want to keep in mind that I want to paint through it. You know, there are a lot of edges that I'm going to deliberately lose here and it's going to help it appear more to be glass than if I carefully paint the whole thing. I think that's a bit of a mistake. There's a cast shadow that goes here. It's a mistake to try and paint this as a thing. You need to paint what you can see through it. And then it will, and then the highlights, and then it will come. Let's rough out the trumpet is furthest left is here. The highest point is somewhere around here. Lowest point comes to a point about there. Daffodils are not a particularly easy flower to paint, I don't think. But they're very rewarding if you can find your way into them. I love painting them. The thing is really, it's to me about daffodils. It's getting the hues, just getting the colours right, getting those yellows right, but making sure that you don't get overexcited and let the values run away with you. You've got to keep the values like within a fairly narrow range, the top half of the scale, including the shadow. That's including the shadow, you know. And hopefully you'll see that. Hopefully this sketch, it's only going to be a sketch today, but kind of a block in. But I'm hoping I'll be able to get it far enough for you to see, you know, how it all works with the colours and also with the disappearing glass. Stand oil would be good, Casey, but it's already, stand oil is quite thick, so it's heat-bodied oil. So it will already be a little bit on the thick side, and I would be inclined to cut it. If you were doing it with a couch like this, I'd be inclined to cut it with a solvent. if you're intending to work on something the next day. If you're doing something completely alla prima, then I don't believe it really matters. You know, you can just use the oil and you'll be fine. Some very dodgy drawing going in here. Never mind. As long as it's close, I'm not going to get too wound up about it today. Can probably fix some of it as I go along, which of course is a terrible idea. And if I was spending a bit more time, I would get definitely more accurate, and I would probably be happier as well. But that's about it. Okay, now there's a cast shadow. There's a division between the background and the ground here, but if I squint right down, I can barely see it. But it's about that height, and there's a cast shadow back here that comes up to it. So the background is darker on this side and lighter on this side. And my setups that I put together are almost always like that. Because I put them in, I have something blocking the light that slightly blocks the light. So that I get a shadow across one side of the background. I think it just really helps. So that's a lovely thing to say, Sandy, thank you. Which colours are you using to paint? Ilya, I'll tell you what I've got on the palette. Titanium white. This is, this yellow here is a green yellow. It's Michael Harding. I'll put out a bit more in just in case I run out. Michael Harding Bright Yellow Lake. The pigment is PY3. It's an arrowlite yellow. It's quite similar to Hansa yellow that a lot of manufacturers call it Hansa yellow. This is cadmium yellow, yellow ochre. This here was, before I used almost all of it, green gold. This is transparent red oxide. This is raw umber. This is burnt umber, was there for a bit of fun, but we don't need that now. And this is ivory black. So if you look at the colours that I've got here and then you look at the photo, you'll see like most of the hues in the photo are pretty much reflected in these colours here. I generally don't put out anything that I'm not going to need to hit the colours that I want. I won't have a blue out there, like, you know, to do complement mixing or anything like that, because there's no blue in the subject. As far as I'm concerned, I don't need it and I won't use it. Let's get some paint down then. So background, I'm going to do that over here actually. Because the way I usually lay things out as I paint is I go from light to dark. What kind of... I'm just thinking about what kind of value I want in the background. It's pretty low, but it's not, I don't think it's like right down the bottom of the value scale. The darkest part of the background. Raw umber by itself is going to be a bit too dark. I'm going to knock it back slightly with a little bit of ivory black. I'm going to bring it up slightly with a little bit of white. But there's more raw umber than anything else in there. And I'm going to put it on with, what shall I use? Hog flat. So this is a Cornelison's brush. It's about a 1/2 inch hog flat. Now what I usually do is I stick my brushes in whatever I used for the couch and then wipe as much of it off as I can there'll be a little bit left on there, and I'm not going on with a completely dry brush to start with. I just want to get this dark value over this side established because, you know, I've got a white panel here, so it's going to be very difficult to judge any values at all, really. We'll do a little bit of drawing out of the trumpet while I'm here because it's going to be a fairly quick study today. But then almost as soon as we start to move over, like out of the light, it starts to go a little bit cooler. So I'm picking up a mix here that has a bit more ivory black in it, more white. By the time we get over to this side, we're kind of probably about halfway down the value range, I would say. So in value terms, it would be like about a value 5 if you were a Munsell type person. Oh, the music. Yeah, people ask me that quite a lot. Actually, this is royalty-free music, which is made for using in videos and soundtracks and stuff, but I really like it, and it's by Kevin MacLeod. And his site is incompetech.com, incompetech.com. And this is one of his tunes, and it's called Relaxing Piano Music. So I'm going to make a little note here because the value that I can see through this bottle is the same as the background, right? So that's the edge of where the glass is. I don't want to lose the drawing, but I want to make a note that this is basically the same value. If I squint down, I can't really see a difference. So I'm already painting through the glass. You know, I don't want to paint the glass, I want to paint through it. I think I need to go a little bit more towards lower chroma and blue in the background on this side. So I'm going to bring in a bit more ivory black and white. And I like to do these bits. I enjoy doing these bits, the background. I like to do them really brushy, you know. I think it kind of helps the painting. I like to have paintings with some areas like kind of quite carefully done, and then a lot of it like other parts like the background especially really sort of brushy. And I think the main thing about backgrounds is I generally have low chroma backgrounds, you know, so I've got a series of boards painted very near neutral colours, and I choose from one of those which one I think I would like to put up there. And then it's about the values. It's mostly about the values, you know. I usually mess about with them a little bit. Oh, Alexandro says, I like to start my paintings with a wipeout. What are your thoughts on wipeout? It's a beautiful way to paint. That's my thoughts on wipeouts. I love doing wipeouts. I love it. But for alla prima, I mean, you could do it. And then, yes, I mean, you could do it alla prima, but I tend to, the reason I often do wipeouts, but the reason I haven't so much here is because I want to leave the, couch on, the oil layer on, where I'm going to paint the lights, the daffodil itself, and I think it's just going to kind of, if I would have to wipe this back. Usually I would tone it. I mean, you need to tone it, obviously, and then you need to wipe it back. But it would mean that I would probably lose chroma here in the yellows. And I want just panel there, just with no other paint on it. So that when these colours that I've mixed here on the palette, when I put those up there, they'll stay true to what I've got. But I mean, yeah, wipeouts is a really nice way to paint. So the ground colour here is a slightly higher value than the background. It's still not that. I'd say there's a hint of going slightly more towards a red-orange, so I'm going to put a little bit of transparent red oxide in it. A little bit of yellow ochre. I'm just pushing it towards orange a little bit. But I don't want to, I want to be careful not to put too much chroma in it. Hopefully that's not going to be too... Because everything is deliberately very neutral in the setup apart from the daffodil, so those yellows really sing out. Soften some edges. And there's a cast shadow here, so I want like a darker version of the ground colour there. And I usually like to paint my cast shadows in before I paint the object that casts them, because it gives you a lot more freedom with how you use the paint. You can do all the edge handling that you want to do when you're just doing the shadow. So this bit of glass here, right? Let's start having a bit of a look at the glass. So I was talking about wanting to paint through the glass rather than actually paint it. So if I squint down, on this left side of the glass, there's a slightly lighter bit here, where it just stands out a little bit against the ground and the background. So instead of actually painting all of the outlines and doing all of that stuff, I'm going to just paint shapes and values. So that's like the outside edge there needs to be a little bit lighter still. It's a bit lighter than the background, but not very much. And I will tend to paint these bits mostly in blocks. So squinting down again, along where the water reaches its top level here, there's a lighter value there as well. So I'll just put that in. So I'm using my background colours. You notice this because I'm not going to be using any colours really apart from my background colours. Maybe we'll need to bring in a little bit of green for the reflections where there's reflected light off the stem. And over this side, if I squint down, there's a dark block just here, which shows the level of the water there, slightly darker than the background there. All of this bit here is the same value as the background, so I just paint through it. And this is all the same value as the ground. So I'm going to leave a little bit here for the stem as it comes up. And then we've got a slightly darker value here that goes just up to the water level. See, I'm just trying to paint the light that you can see through it. And I'm using the background colours to do it. I'm not trying to paint the bottle. I'm deliberately staying away from painting any outlines. This left edge at the top gets suddenly quite dark, and that shows the form here. So I'm looking out for bits that I can bring out just to show where the form is, without actually painting the thing. You know, the biggest mistake you can make, I think, when you're painting things like this is to paint the outline all the way around as a constant thing, because when you squint down, that's not how it appears. Sorry about that, just letting Studio Cat out. He must be hungry. That's starting to come. Have a bit of a stand back. Hello, Ewa. Did I pronounce your name right? I hope I did. It's very nice to see you. Thanks for joining. This bit around the bottom here, it goes lower chroma and it's slightly darker. So I'm going to bring out in some black. Never paint with black, Paul. What are you doing? Bring out some black and let's have a look at what the value is like. Is that all right? Bit on the dark side, maybe a little bit too dark. I know it looks green, but I don't think it is really. I think we're inferring that colour. May bring a little bit in. I want mostly. I think that's a bit dark. So you know that that's too dark. What happens on the base here is the base is a bit thick, so less light can get through, so it goes a little bit darker. My cast shadow needs to be a bit darker now. So I can start to adjust the values a little bit in places. Now I've got some more in. This cast shadow needs to come down in value quite a way. Cast shadows are responsible for showing a lot of the formal stuff, I think. Sweeps up. You can, if you paint a study and you paint everything but the cast shadow, like the background, everything, you'll quite often find that you can feel that there's something there even before you paint the object itself. So having this suggestion of a shadow there, I'm going to smooth some of this out with a soft watercolor wash. This is dry, there's nothing on it. And then we've got obviously the light coming through, which is some of the lightest parts of the painting. So, by painting this bit here, this bit is starting to appear more, There's a very slight suggestion of a darker edge around this part here, but it's not a line. If you don't ever paint lines if you're painting glass. Paint blocks of value, and it will work out much better. I find. I'm just trying to paint values. I'm leaving this little bit here because I know that there's a highlight there. But it really helps you, I think, if you can squint right down while you're painting these bits. Don't be tempted to look at the actual thing. Like if I look here, there is actually a line there, But if I paint that line, it's going to destroy the feeling of the glass. The feeling I'm trying to get is of looking through something. So I want to be painting what I can see through the glass rather than the glass itself. Does that make sense? I'm just adjusting values now a little bit. A lot of it's in now, I just want to adjust the values here and there. And I'll just put in a couple of little details. This is way too dark here, this line I've got around the left edge at the top. I'll put in a couple of little details at the end, like the highlight here, work on this bit of water here a little bit. That should be enough to make it appear. Hello Aris, nice to see you too. Yeah, it's all about painting what you can see through it, not the thing itself. I'm not completely happy about the way the cast shadow is looking at the moment. My drawing is a bit rough, to be fair. I should really be being a little bit more careful than this. But it's kind of a quickish demo today. So I'm going to drag across some of that, soften it a little bit. So actually, just for fun, really, let's get a soft synthetic. So this is a Winsor & Newton Scepter Gold, 1/2 inch. I think it's a combination of synthetic and something or other bristle. Actually, get some. So the very lightest values in this subject are the highlight on this little jar. I gotta let Studio Cat in. Come on then, little fella. Come on, you come in. I know. Not much fun when I'm painting, is it? You can't have your pets. I've got to get the scarf out again. So titanium white is the highest value that you can get in paint. Now the highlights on the bottle are fairly sharp edged. I like to try and get them down with as few strokes as possible, you know. And it's pretty thick paint. Yes, I know. So I haven't done any outlines yet, but it is starting to come. And don't forget, there's still the stem to go, and just to kind of refine it a little bit in places. But I really think if you want to paint glass and have it look like glass, painting the outline is your enemy. You really want to resist the temptation to paint it as a thing. Try to paint what you can see through it, and just think of it as blocks of value rather than a thing. Do you want to say hello to Studio Cat? What is it, little fella? I've got to put the big light on again so you can see him. Come here then. Yes, I know. Yes, I know. You can't stay though. Here he is. For everyone who wants to say hi to Studio Cat, here he is. Say hi. He's going to start purring. He's leaning against the mic. And he's going to start purring, isn't he? I know, but you can't stay because I've got to paint. People are watching, huh? Let's switch back over. Oh, I've got to take that big light off now. It's complicated lighting the studio for painting sometimes. Down we come, down we come. I know, you don't want to go. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's start to think about some simplified He is a lovely old fella. He mostly sleeps now. He's having difficulty with his back legs, quite extreme now. He finds it difficult to get about, and he's becoming increasingly nervous in his old age. He got freaked out by a pheasant the other day. It came walking at him, and he panicked. Poor little fella. They're pretty big, the pheasants around here, though. So, Daffodil. I've got 2 Rosemary's Eclipse, angled eclipse brushes, synthetics, very nice. Slobbering and drooling, oh dear, that sounds awful. Does he have a bed to sleep in, Susan? He doesn't really. He moves around. He's got a little, he sleeps a lot on one of my shelves, a low shelf about 1 foot off the ground, so I can't put anything on there, although it has an old blanket on there with the word dog written on it. I can't even remember where that came from. But if ever I get anything delivered and I leave the box open on the floor, that's it. That box becomes his home for a little while, and it becomes his bed. So he gets about, you know. This value here needs to come down, I think. Me personally, I spend quite a bit of time trying to create the environment first, you know, trying to set up the light in the painting before I paint the stuff too much. But I kind of see the glass, like painting the glass, it's almost like part of the background, really. You know? That's a nice little touch there. You can put that in. I know, yeah. You see, he set him off now, he just wants to pat. He's getting increasingly demanding as he gets older as well. When I do the brush strokes in the background, this is just an aside really, I make a point of trying to avoid patterns. you know, like stuff like this stroke being in the same direction as that stroke, I'll tend to try and take that out. I don't like to have things to be too, you know, it's very, I think we tend towards pattern, you know, psychologically somehow, and it's not how things actually look in the world. I'm going to start roughing in the daffodils. So I'm going to start with, what shall I start with, the trumpet or the radial petals? Start with the radial petals and see. This is when I start to get the fear that my colours are desperately out. So I need a lighter colour for the lightest parts of the radial petals. So I'm going to have a little bit of arylide yellow with a bit of white. Mix that with some of the local colour. And I'm thinking about the light part. And I'm going to paint this. I'm going to try and put them in as kind of blocks of colour. You see, if I had painted into a toned ground here, because this is high chroma and high value colour, I would immediately start to lose the chroma and the value of these colours here. So around here, I reckon, is a bit lower than the local, so I can mix like between these to get a rough kind of continuum of value between the two without disturbing them. The hue. I'm just trying to put stuff in where I think it should go. There's a very light petal sticking out here. I'll try and get a sharp edge on that. Let's try a bit of this shadow colour. I'm strongly feeling that that's too green. I thought it was when I mixed it, so I'm going to bring in a little bit of raw over yellow ochre. Probably going to be a bit too translucent at first. Again, this is kind of, you're going to, if you're confident of where these colours have come from, they came from the down a bit. They came from looking closely at the colours of the daffodil. You can't tell if they're right or not really until all of this white is covered, you know. That's not looking too bad, although it's a bit, because it's very translucent. This is the kind of the problem that you get, because I'm painting, I want the white panel for the lights, but it does make the shadows a bit of a problem sometimes because they go on as a kind of a glaze, because this is very translucent paint and it's a bit difficult to handle. And it's almost like it raises the chroma a little bit. Oh, how do I attach it? Right. I'll show you. Blue tack. They're quite light, these panels. You know, they're only like about that thick. So I just blue tack them up there. They do fall off sometimes. It's really annoying when that happens. Rarely though, to be fair. So I want to get these colours in. I'm trying to get the right value mostly. Trust the hues and the chromas that I've mixed and get the right value in the right place. And then see how they look. So this petal here that I'm doing here, and what I'm thinking about for this petal is I want to relate it to something. So I'm trying to relate it to the background. And it's a bit lighter. It's lighter than the background and has a bit more chroma, but it's still quite a bit darker than, say, this part here. You know, the petal in full light here. So, and I can possibly bring down the background a little bit more. So this is my more greeny kind of yellow. A lot of it is about value control. Flowers is really, it's about value and chroma a lot. I think it's a lot about chroma as well. See, my value of my bottle here, the background that I can see through it is too high. Needs to be lower here so that this yellow shows. Bring it down a little bit. And I've got a lighter yellow. And down there's a bit of light on the edge. Now I think it's not green enough, really. Trevor says, have you tried Feliway for your mug's nerve? No, I haven't actually. I suppose because it's kind of come on him gradually. And he's never been that nervous. He's always been like an inside cat. But it's just lately, I think because he can feel his back legs are going and he knows he can't get away from stuff. I wonder if it's that, you know. Trying to get these shadow shapes to be the right shape. I'm not bothered about painting detail at the moment. In fact, I'm trying very hard not to. But I want to get things the right shape. If I can. And at this kind of stage of a painting, I'm sort of just trying to, the value's not going deep enough. I try to trust what I've mixed. So I'm going raw umber and green gold because I know this value needs to be lower. It's because the paint is transparent and it's going onto a white panel. If I was doing this over multiple sessions, then I would correct it with a glaze afterwards or something like that. That's better, I think. I want to be able to like just begin to feel light and shadow in these colours, even like at an early stage like this. We have a bit of light. I do wish, though, I would be happy if the arylide yellow was less translucent than it is, less transparent. But I want it for the hue. I have a strong feeling I'm going to need to bring that background down now. Even a little bit further, which is, maybe not, but it would be tricky if I did now because, you know, I've started painting the flower, so have to paint around the flower. Sheila says, it looks like just a plain hardboard with no canvas. It is indeed. Those things make me cry. Way too slippery. I like the slipperiness because I like the swooshiness of the paint. I like the swooshy. I like the freeness of the strokes, you know. And then you can be like quite sort of tight and careful with it when you want to, or it can be very loose and you can have a lot of it, you know, kind of expressive brush strokes in it. Let's do a little bit of the trumpet now. Just blocking in. Kind of wishing that I'd gone a little bit darker with the background, but we'll see. So I'm going to get 2 more of these brushes. I only have 4, so I'm going to use all of the ones I've got. So, you know, there's kind of a pattern to the way I use the brushes. I tend to have, for everything I paint, light and shadow, a light brush and a shadow brush. What was that about the green gold? How are you making a green a yellow without blue? Oh, with the green gold. I've got green. Yeah, I've got green gold. Ivory black would pull it green, but it would also drop the chroma. Very soft brushes, yeah. Yeah, that's a big part of the kind of the effect. The question is, do I darken the background now? Or do I go with it and see? Standing back and looking and thinking. It is too light. The background needs to be a little bit darker. What am I going to do? I'm going to get a smaller brush. So this is mostly raw umber and ivory black. I've got to go around what I've painted now, though. That's a better contrast. What's bothering me is that I think this petal up here is about the right colour, but it's not standing out in the right way. And I think it's because the background is insufficiently dark to make it look like light travelling through the petal. So I'm going to bring it down. And I'll sort out a little bit of the drawing while I'm on. I still don't want to get into any detail yet. The thing, I always think the thing needs to work in really simplified terms. And if it doesn't, then there's something wrong with the colour or the drawing or something. I need the big statement to work for me before I start to think about details. Adding more detail, in my experience, won't fix problems like bad values and incorrect drawing. You have to fix those things earlier on. And trying to fix them later on through a painting is a bit of a nightmare. because, you know, you're painting stuff like everything relates to everything else. And if I'm relating something to the background and then I change the background, then maybe it changes what I was relating to it as well. So that petal can be darker now. It's going to have a bit more shadow. Which I think it does need. But there's a suggestion of light coming through it, and here in this bit, I think the translucency of the paint is actually helping, because it helps that kind of feeling of light coming through. You're very welcome, Virginia. Yes, Sheila, I think it pops out a little bit more now. Yeah, Candy, probably still be going for a little bit yet, don't worry. How long have we been going? Oh, an hour and a half. You're kidding me. Wow. I would not have guessed that. An hour and a half already. I would not have guessed that. I thought maybe we might be coming up to about an hour. Let's do a bit of work on the trumpet. So I'm going to put my light area. Now this has a bit of cadmium yellow in it, so it should cover a little bit better, but it also has quite a bit of arylide in it too. Nancy says, how did you prep the hardwood panel before applying the terps and linseed oil? You did get that step right. It basically came prepped. So I'll show you. Oh, endeavour not to knock everything over. I use these for demos at least. I always use those for workshops and stuff. If I'm painting for myself, I do use those sometimes still, but what I often do is I put a layer of oil primer over them and let it dry. Because I prefer the surface. So it's good. That looks like more. The hue is more orange. And the chroma is higher, which is what we want. Put some of the shadow in there. Praying I haven't gone too dark with this shadow colour. I mean, something with a surface with a bit more bite than this would help these translucent colours to adhere more, but you would lose some of the smoothness. Yes, this will be on. It will be on YouTube. If you follow the link, if you came to the link from the email, then you can just follow that link at any point, and you'll be able to find the video again. Just gradually, bit by bit, getting all of the white bits to disappear, so that the panel is covered, and it's very hard to tell what might need adjusting before that's done. I'm making up a bit more of the lighter yellow of the trumpet on the fly because I run out. I think she's starting to come now. I can see just a hint of light and shadow and form starting to come. Oh, that was too much. Thanks for coming, Diane. See you later. Yeah, I would never paint acrylic over oil. Ooh, no. But yeah, oil over acrylic should be all right. I think someone was saying to me the other day that they'd tried that and it didn't. It was they had problems with it. But it's so difficult to know, like, the details. There's a lot of variables could come into something. So this bit needs to go a little bit higher in value because there's more light falling here. So I need to show that value change there. The interesting thing about the light areas is that there's very little detail within the lights. I think it's partly, I'm sure it's partly that a camera has trouble with processing such high chroma color as this. Oh, did I just, did I drop out of Facebook? Try refreshing the, oh, right. Yeah, for some reason Facebook appears to have dropped. Not sure why that is. But YouTube will hopefully still be running. Facebook, frankly, is a little bit flaky for streaming. It's not as reliable as YouTube. I'm not entirely sure why that is. So now I've got most of it in. I'm starting to think about where I need to adjust things. What's standing out to me as needing some work. And at the moment, a lot of it is the drawing of these petals. The values of the background and the petals here are really close. So it's mostly what you can see there. The background is slightly lighter, so I'm going to bring the value up a little bit of the background here. Mostly the biggest difference is a chroma really between the petals and the background. But there's a slight value difference that I want to bring out a bit more. Starting to come a little bit now. So I've done very little, if anything, to the little jar since I just roughed it in, and I don't really think it's going to need any more. Apart from a little bit of detail perhaps here and there. And the yellows are standing out quite nicely against the background, so I just want to try and sort out some of the edges of the petals. And I'm starting to look for little bits that I can do which are going to help me paint the minimum stuff to start to make it kind of be more convincing. There's light and shadow, so I'm looking for like the minimum detail and edge work that I can do on the petals to start to make them appear more petal-like. I think the overall colour blocks I'm pretty happy with. I'm going to do a little bit of softening in the shadows here to blend that a bit. It's tricky, these very translucent colours can be kind of tricky to manage, but they on a slick surface like this, but you can get a really nice effect with them. to, just so I can complete the panel, I'm going to put in, I think that I would like to have more time to work on the form of the petals, but the colours and the light and the shadow are working pretty well. I want to bring the stem in now so I can start to see overall how that's going to fit. So for that, I'm going to need to go a bit more blue-green. So I'm going to put out a bit of phthalo green. I think I put the phthalo green on the materials list, but I forgot to put my own out. I usually only put a tiny amount of this and use even less than I put out. So I'm going to clear a bit of space over here on the palette and mix some green. I wonder why Facebook has gone funny on me today. Yeah, you got to have the stem. You got to have a little stem in there. So I almost always mix my greens like this. I start off with black, ivory black, which in hue terms is actually blue. I bring in some arrowlite yellow, which blue and yellow obviously make green. Wilcox was wrong. And I bring in a little bit of, it's a very yellow green, it's too yellow, so I bring in a little bit of the blue green, the phthalo green, just a little bit to swing the hue back round towards a blue green. It's easy to overdo, so you need to be kind of careful with this. I'm going to bring the value up a little bit. I don't want the chroma to get too high. I'm going to bring the value up a little bit with some white. Didn't really mean to go that far. I was looking at the screen when I picked up the paint. Okay, that's a pretty nice colour for the shadow. And for the light parts, it gets very low in chroma, so I'll go up with white. Deciding what brush to use for this. I usually paint stems. It's tempting just to kind of do it as in a swirl like that, and it would certainly work. Excuse me. But I tend to paint them across the form, like sideways. Need a bit of oil on that before I bring it in. Mostly because I feel it gives a bit more control over the shape. Gets a bit lighter towards the bottom. And I like that. I just like the texture of it. And it gets a bit darker at the top, I would say, here. And it's broken, of course, by the water, by the reflection on the surface of the water, so it doesn't go all the way through. That's another thing that helps the glass to feel like glass. without actually painting the glass. So it kind of, it almost disappears as it gets to the bottom there. So I've just softened it a little bit. There's a bit of the green of the stem is kind of subtly reflected in parts of the glass. So again, I'm not really painting the glass here either. I'm painting like the water, the surface of the water. Just looking for little details which are gonna help to show that. It's almost like you paint the glass almost by not painting it, by deliberately not painting it as much as you possibly can. Just kind of bringing this towards a finish, at least for the stream today now. We got almost the whole thing covered, pretty much covered now. So it's easier to see how all the colours are working together. Sheila, that's really good to hear. Sheila says, painting glass and water has been a mind-bending experience for me, and it's actually starting to click. It is really very much about painting the stuff you can see through it, and then just the odd little details which are going to help. In this case, where there's water in it, for the water to show. less is more. It's like there's no edge here at all, you know, it disappears completely here. Really want to try to avoid, if you can, any sort of hard edged outline painting. Just trying to get this background colour just about right here so I can cut into the forms of the trumpet a little bit to clarify them here, get a sharper edge. This part of the trumpet needs a really sharp edge here where the form shows against the background. That's a bit nicer. So as I'm working round the trumpet here, back into the background, I'm gradually going darker with the background paint that I'm putting on this brush to try and clarify the edges of these forms. Give it a little bit more of that. It's bringing the shape out a little bit. The outside edges, I've found, can be really important in showing like the character of the form of flowers. And they're very, I love painting the trumpets of daffodils because they're very, you could say very expressive shapes. They're very, it's like you can feel that kind of excitement of spring as they're kind of bursting open. Yes, Daphne, when we do the class, we will, I'm sorry to hear that that's happened for you today. But this is, I mean, what's going on here is a fairly kind of complex, really. And it takes quite a lot of control. We will be building up to this kind of stuff in the workshop. Doing a plein air daffodil it's certainly not the easiest thing in the world to paint. And these colours can be difficult to manage to keep clean. But yes, I'll be taking you through it more slowly and in more detail. It's a lot to do with getting those big blocks to work, and not allowing yourself to move on until they do. Which I know that you know that, because that's like my mantra, if you like, that I'm always saying. But yes, we'll be going through a lot of this stuff in a lot more detail when we come to paint these in the course. Oh, right, so if anybody doesn't know about it yet, you probably do if you've come here by an email, but if you don't know about it yet, I've got a workshop coming up in a week and a half, painting spring flowers, which is going to be mostly daffodils. I'll just pop a link if you want to find out some more about it. I'll pop a link in the comments. Yes, definitely not toning the board, Daphne, for sure. you really struggle to keep the colours clean. And that's like one of the most important things about painting daffodils like this is keeping the colours really clean. If you start to pick up some of the tone underneath, you really can get into trouble quite quickly. Because you just lose all of the chroma, and the values are so close as well. Well, I mean, I don't think there's an easy flower to paint. I mean, they all have their challenges. This is the challenge with roses, I think, is the subtlety and the structure. The challenge with daffodils is keeping the chroma up and keeping control of the value a lot of the time, I think. But it can be done. I want to bring up just a sense of more light here around this bit of glass. Without losing quite that much chroma. That's nice. I think I prefer the ground with a little bit more chroma here. Just a touch. Just softening around the glass a little bit here and there. In a lot of places, the glass has almost completely disappeared, which is right and good and how it should be, because you actually see through glass. You don't really see the glass itself, and what you see through it is slightly affected by the glass. But a big part of getting glass to look transparent is getting the values that you can see through it right. And we're not painting things, we're painting light, reflecting off things, and light goes through glass. Okay, I'm going to leave this little study there for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Little introduction to painting daffodils. Oh, sorry, what was that, Nancy? I'm not sure I understand toning the board. Oh, usually, yeah, no, if I was going to tone the panel first, what I would do is I would put the oil couch down and then I would paint into it and then I would wipe it off. And that leaves a thin layer of paint across the surface of the panel. And usually for that, I would use a low chroma near neutral. But the problem is, with the daffodils, if I allow that to get into the daffodils, to these very delicate colours, then I will lose the chroma, and I'll also probably lose control of the values as well, because the values are really close. Remember last week when I did the value study of the daffodils, and the values are actually very close. So toning the panel isn't really a very good idea if you're doing very light, high chroma colors like this. Unless you went all the way around, if you drew it out very carefully and then toned everything around it, you could probably do that. But even if you wipe it out, you have to wipe out so much that you end up with a very dry surface compared to the rest of the painting. And I prefer it to go into a little bit of the oil and solvent mix. You see here, there's no edge on the glass at all. Now, I don't know if that bothers you or not, but personally for me, I don't even notice it unless I look closely at it. I don't notice that there's no edge there. Hello, Linda. The blush with the black handle and the gold tip to blend. What is that? Where is it? What is it? The black handle and the gold tip. Is it this? This is... Oh, I don't know. It's worn off. It's quite a cheap brush though. I think it was Pro Arte or something. Let me see if there's any of the writing left on it. No, it's gone. But it's just a soft watercolor wash brush. That's the kind of thing you want for those. A soft watercolor wash brush. Like this one is very similar. What's this? This is A.S. Handoer Limited. I had no idea where I got that from. Made in England, Handoer. Handoer. But you just want a really soft, synthetic, flat. They usually call them wash brushes for watercolors. And they're the best things to use for that. They work really nicely. That's it, Nancy. Yeah, don't. For these very high chroma colors, I think it's not a good idea to tone the panel first, because you tend to struggle with keeping the chroma. I want to just soften just a little bit this stem, especially here. There we go. Okay, thank you very much for coming, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, Helen, that's probably where I got it from. I will be back probably next week streaming again. Certainly we'll be back again on Thursday. I don't know if I'll be able to stay away from daffodils, so I may well end up doing daffodils again. But you can hopefully, you can see, now we're far enough through this to call it an alla prima painting. All of the colours that are in the daffodils are basically mixed. Once I'd mixed the 4 colours, light and shadow, for the trumpet and the radial petals, slightly different hues, like the more green yellow and the slightly more orange yellow, but still both much more green than cad yellow. But once they were mixed, it was mostly a case of just putting them in the right place and trying to treat the edges. There's a couple of little things that if I had maybe another hour, I would work on the flower a little bit more. Some of the values I think could do with a little bit of tweaking here and there, and some of the drawing could do with a little bit of tweaking. But this is basically how I approach painting daffodils. You need a nice clean panel, and then keep those colours as clean as you possibly can. And your daffodils will thank you for it. They're tricky. All flowers are tricky. Thanks very much, everybody, and I'll see you again soon.